everybody. Welcome to the Indie Film Chat with your host, Anthony Watkins. I am Anthony Watkins, and I'm here to chat with directors who I admire, or about films that I admire from directors who I don't. So sit back and listen to us chat about filmmaking. In the studio today is Sam Longoria. Sam is best known for working on Ghostbusters. He worked in the visual effects department. He built the cameras that photographed the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Sam is also an actor and played a sizable part in my second feature comedy, Mall Robbers, back in 2006. Sam is in the studio today, and we are going to chat about making independent movies. Hi, Sam. How are you today? We have Sam in the studio. Again, we have him all week. And I know that this podcast is geared toward the low-budget, independent filmmaker, the guy that's making a movie for $5,000 or something like that. But I wanted to talk today about comedy, how we come up with our comedy gags, how we try to come up with our jokes, because I'm a comedy writer. My first three films are comedies, slapstick comedies, and my next feature film will be a comedy. I love comedy. And so I wanted to talk to Sam because he has a comedic background. And
It's a comic background.
We're going to have a general discussion about comedy.
As you can see, I have a fine sense of humor.
So how you doing, buddy?
I'm happy. I really am.
So where do your jokes come from?
Well, they come from my solar plexus. Actually, there's a place in my stomach that tells me if something is funny. And I can tell if it's funny because I hear myself laughing. And there I am laughing, and I'm not thinking about it. I'm out of my head. I'm out of my regular head. I'm into the reptile part of the brain where comedy comes from for me.
So who's your influences on comedy?
Who are my influences?
That's a big question.
Jack Benny got me my first job. So I love Jack Benny. I absolutely, and I would even if he hadn't got me my first job. And George Burns, of course. I played blackjack with him at the Flamingo Hotel at 4:30 in the morning at once. And he was incredibly funny and incredibly nice. And all he wanted to talk about was Jack Benny. So I told him my Jack Benny stories. And I told him that all Jack Benny had wanted to talk about was George Burns. And that was their friendship. They would go away from each other and talk about themselves. So they were big influences. Groucho was my very favorite Marx brother. They're all wonderful. There was a time when I wasted time mourning that I hadn't gotten in touch with Groucho since I've gotten to meet most everybody I've ever wanted to. And I just didn't know that I could look him up and write to him. And then he wasn't available anymore. And so I hope that I get to meet him in the next life. Let me see. Zero Mostel, incredibly funny man in The Producers. Gene Wilder, of course. There was a time in my life when I said, I will walk 10 miles to see Gene Wilder in anything. And he was just incredibly wonderful. I can't believe he's gone. And this, of course, leads to comedy. Why? Because they took huge risks. Their comedies were about, huge things. The town does not like black people, and they have hired a sheriff who is black. And you know that something's going to happen there. It's about to explode.
Did you ever do any stand-up?
Yes, I did. I was 17 years old, and for some reason, when they would have a talent night somewhere, I would go there and I would do monologues of things that are you poor? Would you like to be? Send all your money to this address. Box HELP, Creslet, California. Anyway, stuff like that. And I would write all these things down, and then I would memorize them, and then I would say them for 45 minutes at a stretch, and I would tell jokes to drunks till 2 a.m. And for somebody who does not drink, I spent an awful lot of time in those places. So anyway, yeah, I did stand up, and I wanted to. And you have to be some sort of a deviant to do that. I'm convinced of that.
Well, I planned to do a little bit of stand-up years ago, and I read several places, comedians said it takes 5 years of constant stand-up work to become even average or good. And I'm like,
Yep.
man, so I went in a different direction of just writing and getting into film work because I didn't want to put in 5 years of getting booed off the stage. And I don't think I had that thick of a skin to deal with that.
The problem is when they bring rakes. Rakes are really dangerous, and I don't know how they got them on the bus. But yeah, it does take a long time. You have to do it. And then everybody is waiting for you to say some absolute pearl of funniness. And that is the time that the pearl of funniness will not come down the chute. It just won't happen. I love comedy because it makes me laugh.
I know it.
And it's stupid to say that, but it's the truth. It's obvious.
It's to write something that makes somebody make an audible expression, a laughter. It's not like you write a piece of drama and you can hear them really enjoy it. Or you write, I mean, I suppose if you wrote something that's a horror or scary, that you can hear somebody scream. But I think that the laughter, it's involuntary.
Yeah, they can't help it.
You're forcing somebody to make noise off of something, an idea that you wrote down on a piece of paper.
If a scientist came in here and said, I couldn't avoid hearing you inhaling repeatedly very loudly, you can't really describe what laughter is or why do we do it. I don't know. It releases tension. It fixes a whole bunch of illnesses. There's a merry heart doeth good like a medicine is in Proverbs, and it's true. It helps you. And I have done an awful lot of doing comedy in rest homes and hospitals and things like that. And just having somebody say, we're so glad that you came to perform for us. It made our day so much better, and that is a wonderful thing.
I had a guy, I was at a wedding in Portland, which is about 6 hours south of me here. And I'm sitting at a wedding at a table at the reception, and the guy next to me, I didn't know, the groom walks up and says, hey, this is so-and-so, and he introduces us. And the guy says, oh, you're Anthony Watkins. He goes, I watched Counseling Day when I was going through chemotherapy and laughed myself sick every day for a week, and it was great therapy. And I was sitting there going, well, thanks, man. That's
no
worth
kidding.
more. That right there is worth the value of the price I paid for make that movie. That's happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
So to hear back that people said, I had a family out in Nebraska order a copy of Counseling Day over eBay. They liked it so much they bought 6 more copies and handed them out to their friends. And they sent me a note saying, we love this movie. We watch it every Christmas. It's our Christmas. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's a family in the middle of the country that I don't know that likes my jokes. Yeah. So that's why I do it. How do you make a joke? What's your process of making something funny?
A joke, and this is what I taught my stand-up classes. This is what I taught my improv classes. If you try to be funny, you better put a lot of effort into it. You better do it over and over until you get really good at it. There is a short circuit. There is a short route, a shortcut that will get you to the funny place, which we call the funny dimension. If you're in a room with another person and you're trying to be funny, suddenly the two of you can hear each other's thoughts. You can it's not just telepathy. It has to do with all of you going to where the jokes are. And it happened when I was helping out in the studio with the Firesign Theater. It helped on my stage. It happens rarely. When the first time you have it happen, being in the funny dimension with somebody else, you have to go rethink your understanding of the world, because we can't read each other's thoughts. Mm-hmm. We learn how to interact with each other because you can't predict what somebody's going to do. But on the other hand, under certain circumstances, you can, and I've done it, and I've seen it. And the process for comedy is usually going to that reptile brain and not thinking and not being in your head and not doing anything rational, just saying the next thing that comes out of your mouth, not out of your head, out of your mouth. And you hear yourself making the joke at a distance. And you can hear it. You can hear them laughing, but you're also kind of emotionally distant from it. So you're not upset when the joke isn't funny or it isn't whatever. You're not trying to be funny. Is a real good way of getting there.
I work on comedy bits and jokes over a long period of time. Some of my jokes take forever to come about. I write down comedic ideas that pop into my head all the time. I carry a notebook like you probably do. And funny things that happen throughout the day, I'll jot a little kernel down. And I also like a lot of wordplay. I like when somebody says something that could mean two different things, or you mash together a couple of words. So I worked on this one particular joke that made it into my third movie, Man of War 4. Real quick, if you're listening out there, push pause, go to our Vimeo page, Indie Film Chat on Vimeo, and rent Man of War 4. Couple of bucks. It'll help us out to make our next picture, and you won't get burned for any spoilers coming up. All right, back to the story. So I had this joke, and I liked the wordplay. It used to crack me up when I'd be at a restaurant, I'd be ordering some soup, and I'd ask for crackers. And I like to take
There's lots of levels there.
crack whore. I always thought it would be hysterical if they brought back a crack whore. And I would say, no, I wanted crackers for the soup. Well, it took me a long time to figure out how to put that into a movie. And I did. We finally figured it out that we were going to start the joke right at the end. We cut to a flashback of a guy in a restaurant right when the waiter brings up a crack whore. And he looks up and he sees her and says that. He goes, I wanted crackers. I said crackers, not a crack whore. Audience laughs a little bit. Now, I know it's a kind of a dumb joke, but it took me a year to work that out to where it was good enough to put in one of my movies.
And that's the process.
That's the process.
That's the process of creating it.
For me, it's the process of just exaggerating, just pushing the exaggeration level until it makes me laugh inside. And furthermore, I never, like that joke, I never make a joke for somebody else, for a customer base. I always make the jokes for me to make me laugh, because I know there's a certain percentage of the population that are like me. If I laugh, I know somebody else is going to laugh. So I keep pushing the envelope on absurd until I sit there and giggle, and then I figure out how I can film that and put it into a movie.
I got into Facebook specifically to hone my joke writing skills, because I'd been away from it for a while, and there were all these people saying absurd things. And if you look at Facebook and just read what everyone's saying, man, it's just a ripe field of comedy just waiting to be created. People will say the dumbest things.
I had a girlfriend who was a school teacher, and she said, I like being a school teacher because I have summers off. It's great. I said, and I'll back up a little bit and say, we were talking about that, and I mentioned to her, I said, you got it great. You got summers off. She goes, I like that. She goes, you know what I'd like to be better? I'd like to be a garbage man. They only work one day a week. And I laughed, and then I looked over, and she wasn't laughing.
No.
I said, are you serious? And she goes, yeah, I was like, sweetie, they
have roots. They go all over town.
They divide the city up into 5 different sections. So I used that. It took me a while to work out. What you're trying to do is you're trying to cut down the number of words you put into a comedic beat or a joke, but keep the same amount of information.
Right.
Once you start to lose the information, then you've gone too far. Too many words without adding that dumbs down or that slows down the reaction.
When RCA started making TV sets, their whole plan was to make the best TV set anybody had ever made. And then they would remove components. Mm-hmm. They would take tubes out until it didn't work anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And then they would put that last tube back in.
That is the way you structure a joke.
It is. It is exactly the way that you structure a joke. You can write a joke and just say what it is you're trying to say and say...
Now, I was thinking about this earlier. It's funny you bring this up because... There are a couple of exceptions to that, like Norm Macdonald or like
sure.
Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
Whose humor is in the explanation of what's going on.
The characters and the rich background.
That's
everything.
the exception. You have to be very good to add 10 minutes of description and have that be the joke.
Yes, I'm very sorry for Bill Cosby and what he is, for whatever reason, going through what he's going through, because for a long stretch of time, he was easily the funniest person working.
Sure.
Easily. We would wait for his records to come out because when you listened to the new one that had come out, you would scream with laughter for 18 minutes on a side and then turn the record over and scream with laughter for another 18 minutes on the other side.
Sure.
It was wonderful. And I'm still grateful to him for realizing he didn't tell jokes. He never told jokes.
Yeah,
he told stories,
Mhm.
and some of the detail work that was in
Yeah.
the stories and the characters and their motivations and all those things.
I grew up
Incredibly
with him as an inspiration. You know, Why Is There Air is a comedy album I'd listened to 100 times.
For me, when I'm trying to talk to actors and tell them what the comedy part is, the first thing is don't think. The second thing is comedy is all about a surprise. There is a surprise that somebody didn't see coming, and as soon as they get it, or as soon as they see what the surprise is, that's when they laugh, or they laugh several beats later. But that's what you're trying for, is a surprise.
It's true. Yeah. I was relating that to slapstick also, and I think it applies with slapstick. You're surprised with the way that you've structured a pratfall, or a kick to the nuts, or something that. It isn't the fact that the guy fell down that's funny. It's the way that you structure it. It's got to be a surprising way, or something that catches the audience off guard.
In the best book on movie directing I've ever read, which was Jerry Lewis's book called The Total Filmmaker, and you can find them. They are now $457 at Amazon, or you can contact me, because I bought them all up as soon as I realized how good they were, and I would give them out to students and stuff. And now they're really wonderful, wonderfully happy with me. But in that book, he says that Laurel and Hardy's movies, if you want to watch comedies and see how film comedy should be structured, Laurel and Hardy will always have a shot that says, "Look at this, the door is open." And you don't see it there, except it's put in so subtly and so well that when the laugh happens, it's a huge surprise, because they've showed you what is about to happen, but they don't telegraph it, which is a whole other thing. You don't want to really make it huge. But
Laurel and Hardy and the Three Stooges are both heavy influences on my childhood, and I like how...
And Jerry Lewis's, too.
Jerry Lewis. I like how earnest they were.
Yeah.
Laurel and Hardy pushing the piano up the stairs or whatever they were doing were very earnest about it. They weren't in on the joke. They weren't asking questions. See, I don't like the current style of some of the comedy where the characters on screen are asking the questions the audience is thinking. So they are commenting on the joke. One of them, real specific, I don't remember the name of the movie. It was recently. The boss tells everybody you can't have the party. And so they're like, okay, no party. They start winking at each other. There's going to be a party. And he's like, I'm right here. I can hear you. No party. And then they keep saying it, but they keep winking at each other. Yeah, we're going to have and they're whispering loud enough for the boss to hear. Well, he got into the realm of saying what the audience is thinking. He's right there.
We
he
call
can
that
hear
meta.
You.
It's meta work.
Yeah, meta work. Okay. I'm not 100% fan of that.
No, me either. The fourth wall is got to be solid sometimes.
And the characters, for me, to be really funny, have to be like Home Alone. Very earnest. They're earnestly trying. They're crooks. They're trying to break in. He's a kid. He's trying to defend. They're not in on the joke. They're not in on the fact.
No.
So I don't know. That's where I'm coming from. The characters, the guys that are acting out my bits, have to believe that they are real. And they're really trying to do something that's funny. It happens to be funny.
There was a recent Bond film with the new blonde James Bond, and he's in the family castle in Scotland, and these men are going to come and kill them, and they have to kill them first. And I just suddenly got it, and I realized I'm watching James Bond, Home Alone. And it wrecked it for me. Absolutely wrecked it. Because somebody could have spent 2 minutes with a pencil and an eraser and fixed it so it didn't just call to some guys, some crooks are coming over and I have to rig improvised munitions, and because that's all it was. And it was not Bond. It was too hip for the room. I know somebody had to have thought he was very funny doing that, but James Bond Home Alone is a Saturday Night Live sketch. It's not a Bond picture. So that anyway, that's just my weirdness. But comedy has to have a surprise. If there's no surprise, the other thing it needs something very solid, and the bad guy has to be outrageously bad. I remember when Ghostbusters came out, and everybody said, the villain is a guy from the Environmental Protection Agency, which at that time was pretty much sacred. He's with the Environmental Protection Agency. You can't make fun of him. But they did. And they were absolutely right to make fun of him. He was a wonderful villain in the picture. And so things have to be big, and the stakes have to be high. You can't just do a comedy where there's no death, there's no danger, there's no inevitability of destruction. The worst that's going to happen is that the character stands around looking awkward. And I am horrified that most comedies are like that now.
I was just going to ask you that. If somebody's listening out there, wants to make a comedy or is currently trying to make a comedy, can anybody make a comedy, or do you have to have something?
Oh, I'm going to be very, very un-PC. I'm going to be very, very charitable.
Okay.
And that is no. There are people who should be kept away from comedy.
I agree. I was working on a corporate gig that we were adding some pretty good comedy to, but the guy in charge is throwing out ideas that aren't funny.
Yeah.
What they are rehashed. Hey, remember that commercial where everybody said, "What's up?" Let's throw that in. That's hysterical. I'm like, that's not funny.
There's a thing where people started saying random. Oh, that's a very random comment. And I finally had to say, well, random means that it could go in any direction at any time. Is that what you mean? No, it makes me laugh. That's what random means. Random does not mean funny. Funny does not mean random. There's a reason we have different words for them.
Okay, so if not everybody can necessarily write a joke or make a funny movie, who's this podcast for?
Who's this podcast for?
Yeah, who is this podcast for?
This is for the guy making the movie who really just wants to make an audience laugh. This particular episode.
Okay.
So if he wants to make an audience laugh, he's not going to settle for random. He's not going to settle for awkward.
Okay.
He's going to say, the building's on fire, and it's going to be something huge. Or the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is walking down the street because poor Danny Aykroyd envisioned him. Whoops, what did you do, Ray? That thing. That works because it's huge. And it wouldn't work if it was less huge.
So have a character overreact in an earnest way.
Oh, absolutely.
Have a guy...
It's got to be real to him.
Okay, so a guy's late for work. He's trying to leave the house. That's not necessarily funny. But
No.
if you have him really overreacting and grabbing things and running out and forgetting and running, and you amp up the absurdity until it starts to tickle something. That's how you get to funny.
Woody Allen described it as it's a level where things are suddenly far out. No, he didn't mean far out like really great. He meant far out of your experience. So surreal, because that's where it goes. When you get into funny, in the funny dimension, you get into where something is funny. If you go too far, it'll get profound. Everybody goes, oh my gosh, the movie Groundhog Day goes right into profound.
Sure.
And it belongs there. It is a wonderfully profound movie. What would you do if you got to redo the same day over and over and over until you became a better person? That's profound.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily funny, but by golly, that's a funny picture.
Well, think about when he steps off the sidewalk into that mud puddle in Groundhog Day. They made it a foot deep. That's funny. If it was 4 inches deep, it wouldn't have been all that funny.
It would be an inconvenience.
So amp up the comedic beat until it's almost too much, and that makes it funny.
Yes, it does.
There's a scene in Mall Robbers, which is a movie that you were in.
Yes.
Where the bad crew, the clowns, were showing up with a truck full of tools. And originally I had a guy throw a tool and knock one of them out. He threw a hammer. And so what we did to make that really funny was
it got bigger and bigger.
It got bigger. He kept throwing. They threw a whole truckload of tools on a guy.
We're talking about a pickup truck.
A pickup truck, and then we cut after about 45 seconds of tool throwing. We cut to him, and he's lying under a pile of tools.
Yeah.
Now this is a slapstick cartoon style.
Yeah, it's
movie.
bigger than would actually happen.
That's one way to make a scene funny, is to amp it up until it starts to tickle something inside of you.
Somebody somewhere wrote an article that was like medical implications of the Three Stooges, meaning what will happen if you actually take a 45 caliber service automatic and shoot someone in the butt. He will die. That is what will happen. He will die. Okay, so it can't be realistic. Oh, he shot me in the butt.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm dead. You know what I mean? Okay, we're laughing because that wouldn't work, and we're laughing because, you know, you don't see that. You just see somebody going, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
And it is it's important to recognize that as soon as the audience goes, oh, he was really hurt. That's it. Comedy's gone. Comedy has left the building. It is not going to be funny for a while. You can make it funny, but you have to do a lot of work. I really think that comedy is magic. And sometimes magic doesn't work. And then you have to trim it out and shoot another gag and put it in there. But for the most part, as long as you're willing to give it up and say, it's funny, but it's not as funny as I need here, you have the only amount of control that you have really is trimming things. As editors say, when in doubt, throw it out. And that also works for refrigerators. So, but really, there should be a surprise. There should be something that happens that's so out of what you were thinking was going to happen that you laugh. And it's much easier to say that than it is to actually come up with one. So when I saw your picture consistently being funny to the end, because most comedies lose it at the end. Most comedies were great, and then they die. And then a small percentage of them actually are funny till the credits roll. And your pictures were that.
You know, we've been talking a lot about slapstick and physical comedy because that's my background. You know, I grew up with the Pink Panthers.
Blake Edwards.
Peter Sellers.
Yes.
I love his movies.
Yeah, me too.
You know, any kind of cartoon, Looney Tunes stuff, all that. So we're not necessarily talking about writing a structured joke that a character, but we're talking about comedic beats on the screen. If you guys out there are listening, and you're writing a romantic comedy or you're writing a cerebral comedy where you have to write a bunch of jokes, I'm not necessarily getting into how you're going to...
That's smart alecky Hollywood dialogue. That's can be funny. In fact, a great deal of it is funny, but it's not written just to be funny. It's there to push the story along and like that. If you're actually or you're looking at a picture, there are a couple pictures I can think of that were low budget and not made all that well, but they're screamingly funny, like Kentucky Fried Movie. It's a sketch comedy. It's a sketch movie. They have a whole bunch of different things. There's no through line. Things are not, when there is a callback to an earlier joke, it's a treat. It's a wonderful treat. There are some, because for the most part, you just think you're going to see 20 4-minute sketches. And it rose above that. It's really very, and the other one that John Landis made, which was Amazon Women on the Moon, which it's another sketch movie, and it's very much like the Kentucky Fried Movie, but he by that point was really getting good at it. Comedy does not necessarily mean a big budget.
True, yeah.
Yeah, because all you're trying to do really is make somebody else laugh.
I don't sit around. I write down any comedic idea that pops into my head throughout the day, and then I expound. I jot down a story around them. I try to figure out how that's going to be funnier. I've got ideas for the next script that we're working on that are just kernels of ideas that I haven't fleshed out yet. Stuff like I want a character to be a specialize in installing peepholes and only peepholes.
Peoples who love peoples are the luckiest peoples in the world.
How do you pay a mortgage only installing peepholes? That cracks me up.
Yeah.
I want to have a guy buy instructions for making a back cracker off of the internet. And he creates a gigantic machine that when he pulls a lever, it just about cripples him.
Pulls his spine out of his shirt.
So just comedic ideas that pop into your head, write them down, and just sit around and think up a scene, flesh out that little thing that made you laugh.
For me, it is looking and thinking about a scene just a hair too long. If you're watching the story and the guy gets out of the car and walks up the sidewalk and goes to the house and rings the bell, okay? There's no comedy in that. It's also not even really necessary. You can cut almost all of that out. Walter Murch would call that shoe leather. You just have the sound of shoe leather, the guy going by, and you can trim all that out, and the movie gets shorter, and nobody even notices because the scene didn't really matter. Well, if you see the scene and there is stuff in the scene, I wrote a sketch once about a guy who goes on a date, first date with a girl, and the dad is a demon. I mean, there's a real demon with cloven hooves, and he's got a hellmouth in his den. You go in, there's a hole in the floor that leads down into the pit of hell, and you hear people screaming and wailing, and there's fire and all that. And yeah, it was too much, but it was revealed a little at a time. And and anybody who's ever been on a first date hoping that the dad is not going to be there or the dad is going to like them or whatever, yeah, this one resonates. But the only reason that I went with that was all these times I've gone there and gotten quizzed by her family, like, so have you ever done any hard time? I was just wondering, do you like gladiator movies? You know, it's like an airplane. But anybody who's been through that will go, yeah, there is an evil streak in dads sometimes. And they mean well, of course, you know, but sometimes... the gun. They should leave the gun at home. They are home. Oh, I see. All right, never mind. What kind of things do you like to have done? Do you like editing? Do you like writing? Do you like shooting so that it's funny? I noticed you're very good at setting up the camera so that it does most of your staging for you, which is a gift. That's really good.
Yeah, you know, I stage the scene, I set the camera, I direct my comedic movies, I edit, I do all the major parts of it because that's what I've always done and I've gotten good at it. And explaining to an editor or to a camera guy where to put something or how to cut something would probably take longer than just doing it myself at this point. Yeah, you know, you're staging for comedy, you're putting the camera in the most advantageous part of the room that you would want to be standing if you were there to watch this pratfall happen.
Your camera is the witness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you're also trying to compose it in such a way that adds comedic value to it, so that you're hiding the gag or some technical issues there that you're trying to cover. You know, if you're going to have a dummy fall through the screen and have the actor pop up, you have to stage it in such a way that you don't see
There's only one place that they can be for that gag to work. Comedy for me is like a drug, and all the best parts of a drug. It makes you forget how bad things are. It helps you to heal. There's lots of things. It's a really, really good drug. And I would do almost anything to have a part of my movie or my stage show make the audience laugh. And as a little boy genius growing up, I got picked on a lot by kids who were older than me. Everybody in my class was 3 years older than me. And man, I learned very quickly who were my friends, who were my enemies. And years later, I still am in contact with the big guys who stuck up for me and didn't let the other guys pick on me. It was great. And the number one thing that I learned as a little boy genius was that comedy was a weapon. Okay? And I'm not talking about if I could get them to laugh, they would like me and everything would be sweet. I mean, I wanted to be so funny that they would laugh so hard that they would die.
Right.
Yeah. I'm serious. And after a while, I realized that was not a reasonable thing, and I got over that, and I stopped being so angry, and things were better. And comedy did that Comedy did that. So what is your comedy leading you to?
You know, I think that we're probably going to continue to make our comedy features. The detective show we're working on right now is not a comedy. It's a drama. It's a film noir. And the reason for that was I wanted to make a 6-part web series, but most of the web series, the low-budget web series that are out there that I've seen, are all trying to be funny.
Yeah.
And they're terrible.
They're awful.
There are a couple of guys in the room trying to be funny, doing whatever they're doing, and I didn't want to be in that pool of web series, even though I'm sure I could make a funny web series. Cause,
I think you're going to make a really good noir.
But I decided that we're going to go in a different direction. So for the time being, I'm not doing a lot of comedy right now, but, we just shot 6 television commercials for my coffee shop here north of Seattle, and they've got comedic beats all the way through, and we've got some pretty outrageous stuff in them. So I'm doing some comedy, but...
It's been wonderful talking to you today.
Yeah, I'm glad that we got to talk about comedy. You know, we talk about comedy when we're not on the air all the time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an elusive subject to get your arms around. You know it when you feel it. I don't know how much you can get out of this podcast, but it's a subject I enjoy, and I thought we'd talk about it for a while. I really appreciate you, Sam, stopping by and spending a few minutes. We're going to cut it a little bit short tonight.
Thank
you
I'm sure very much for inviting me, and I always love coming up here, and you're one of my favorite people, and this is just great. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening. Go to our Vimeo page, Indie Film Chat, and rent a couple of our movies and support the cause. If you guys out there, if there's anybody listening who has a finished movie that they want to talk about, send me a link to it. I'll check it out, and if I find it interesting, maybe we'll chat for an hour. So, I am Anthony Watkins. This has been Indie Film Chat. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will talk again.